I stole a billionaire's dragon. Now he won't let me go. You know those moments in life when you realize you've made a terrible mistake, like cutting your own bangs during a crisis, or touching a mysterious dragon egg that definitely wasn't meant for you. Well, guess what? I did the second one. And now, a furious billionaire is at my door. A baby dragon won't stop calling me mama. And apparently, I'm magically bound to a man I cannot stand. But don't worry, this silly story begins. Stick around to see how my normal, disastrous, life turned into a magical roller coaster of danger, romance, and one very overpowered dragon baby. Like and subscribe before a billionaire kidnaps you. Chapter 1. The Egg That Ruined My Life. You know those moments in life when you realize you've made a terrible, irreversible mistake? Like getting bangs during a crisis, or drunk texting your ex, or, I don't know, accidentally becoming magically bound to an arrogant billionaire because you touched a forbidden dragon egg. Yeah, that last one? That's my current situation. But let me back up. My name is Justine Carter, and 48 hours ago, I was just your average, overworked zookeeper at the Eldoria Lunar Reserve. The most exotic thing in my life was the occasional unicorn with indigestion, and my biggest problem was figuring out how to make rent while drowning in student debt. You know, normal 26-year-old problems, not whatever this is. It started during the night shift from hell. I'd been stuck doing inventory in our massive storage facility, a job that usually went to the new hires, but we were short-staffed because half our team had called in sick after the holiday party. Pro tip: never mix fairy wine with tequila. The hangover lasts for days, and you might temporarily grow wings. Just one more hour, I muttered, scanning the shelves of magical supplies. One more hour, then I can go home. Open that bottle of wine, and pretend this day never happened. That's when I saw it. Tucked behind a stack of Phoenix feed bags was something that definitely shouldn't have been there. A large, shimmering egg the size of a basketball, its surface swirling with patterns that looked like golden galaxies. I froze, clipboard dropping from my hands. What the actual fuck? We didn't have dragons at Eldoria. Nobody had dragons anymore. They were practically extinct, and the few eggs left in the world were kept in high-security vaults, owned by the disgustingly wealthy elite, not stuffed behind some bags of magical bird seed in a storage room. I did what any responsible employee would do. I documented it, took photos, and filed an official report. Someone had clearly made a massive mistake, and I wasn't about to be blamed for it. But then, I made my fatal error. Just before leaving, I reached out and touched the egg. Just once, just to see what it felt like. The moment my fingers brushed its surface, the egg began to glow. A warm, golden light pulsed beneath its shell, and something inside shifted, responding to my touch. Nope, I said, yanking my hand back. Nope, nope, nope. Not my problem. Filing that report was enough. Whatever this is, it's above my pay grade. I went home, crawled into bed, and convinced myself it was fine. Everything was fine. I was so wrong. The next morning, I was rudely awakened by someone trying to break down my apartment door. And by someone, I mean Cassian fucking Darcy, Billionaire CEO, owner of the reserve, and apparently the world's angriest man. The door burst open before I could even get out of bed. I scrambled to my feet, still in my ratty pajamas with my hair looking like a bird's nest, only to find myself face to face with 6 feet of tailored suit and barely contained rage. Cassian Darcy was exactly as attractive as the magazines made him out to be, which only made me hate him more. Dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes that looked like they could freeze hell itself. He stood in my tiny apartment like an emperor who'd accidentally walked into a peasant's hut, his disgust barely concealed. "You touched it?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I blinked, still half asleep. "Roman, I what?" "The egg," he growled, advancing on me. "Did you touch it? How did you even get in here? This is breaking and entering. I own the building." Of course he did, because why wouldn't the guy who owned the reserve also own my apartment building? That's just how my luck worked. "Answer the question," he insisted. "Did you touch the egg?" I filed a report. It wasn't supposed to be there, and that's not what I asked. He pulled out his phone, showing me security footage from the storage room. There I was, clear as day, reaching out to touch the egg. As we watched, the egg began to glow on screen. "Oh shit, that egg," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "was worth more than this entire city. It was supposed to be in my private vault, and now," he ran a hand through his hair, looking like he wanted to strangle someone. "Probably me. Now it's bound to you." "Bound to me?" I repeated. What does that even mean? It means, he said, that you're coming with me? Now. Like hell I am. I have work and you're fired. I gaped at him. You can't fire me for filing a report about a suspicious egg. I'm not firing you for the report. I'm firing you because you're going to be too busy moving into my estate to keep working here. I'm what? He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile a shark might give right before eating you. Pack a bag, Miss Carter. You have 5 minutes. And if you try to run? His smile widened. Well, let's just say that would be very unwise. And that's how I ended up in this mess. Because I touched an egg that wasn't mine. And now I'm being kidnapped by a billionaire who looks like he wants to murder me. But hey, at least I didn't get bangs, right? Chapter 2. Welcome to my nightmare, also known as Cashin's Mansion. Let me paint you a picture of how I ended up in this situation, crammed into the back of a Rolls-Royce that probably cost more than my entire life, sitting next to a dragon egg that wouldn't stop glowing, while Mr. Tall, Dark and Murderous typed furiously on his phone and ignored my existence. You know this is kidnapping, right? I said, for probably the 10th time. Like, actual, literal kidnapping. Cassian didn't even look up from his phone. You signed an employment contract with Ildoria Lunar Reserve that included a magical binding clause. Section 7, Paragraph 3. In the event of unexpected magical phenomenon, employees may be required to assist in containment and resolution. That clause was about unicorn flu outbreaks. The language is intentionally broad. He finally glanced at me, one eyebrow raised. Perhaps you should have read the fine print. I slumped back in the leather seat, which was annoyingly comfortable. I hate you. The feeling is mutual, I assure you. The egg between us pulsed with light, as if it found our bickering entertaining. Every time I shifted away from it, the glow would dim, and an annoying humming would start, like it was complaining about the distance. Cassian had tried to move it to the front seat earlier, only for it to start vibrating so violently the whole car shook. So here we were, stuck together, while his chauffeur drove us through the wealthiest part of the city. You know those neighborhoods where every house looks like a small castle? Yeah. We passed those houses. Apparently, they weren't fancy enough for Cassian Darcy. No, his estate was hidden behind actual golden gates, with grounds so extensive I couldn't even see the main house from the entrance. We drove past manicured gardens, a literal maze, because of course he had one, and what looked suspiciously like a private Quidditch pitch. Are you compensating for something? I muttered. His lips twitched. I don't need to compensate for anything, Miss Carter. The car finally stopped in front of what I can only describe as a Gothic palace having an architectural identity crisis with a modern mansion. It was all sweeping spires and floor-to-ceiling windows, with gargoyles that I'm pretty sure were actually petrified demons. A line of staff waited on the front steps, all immaculately dressed, and wearing identical expressions of polite curiosity. I suddenly became very aware that I was still in my pajamas, specifically, my rattiest pair of sweats, and a t-shirt that said "Dragons are my spirit animalo." The irony. Mrs. Henderson will show you to your room, Cassian said, already walking away. Do try not to touch anything else that doesn't belong to you. Wait, I called after him. What am I supposed to do with the egg? He turned, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across his face, pain, maybe, or regret, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Keep it close, he said, and whatever you do, don't let anyone else touch it. And then he was gone, leaving me with an elderly woman who looked like she'd been waiting her whole life to give someone a makeover. Whoa dear, Mrs. Henderson said, eyeing my outfit. We have so much work to do. The next hour was a blur of activity. I was whisked through corridors that probably had more square footage than my entire apartment building, past priceless artifacts and paintings that definitely looked haunted, and finally into a suite that was bigger than my childhood home. These will be your quarters, Mrs. Henderson announced, as if she were showing me to a royal chamber, rather than my gilded prison cell. The room was gorgeous, I'll give them that, all soft blues and silvers, with a bed that could fit 10 people, and a bathroom that belonged in a spa. A walk-in closet bigger than my bedroom was already filled with clothes in my size, which was both impressive and creepy. How did you know my measurements? I asked. Mrs. Henderson smiled mysteriously. Mr. Darcy is very thorough. That's not an answer, that's actually more concerning. Dinner is served at 7 sharp, she continued, ignoring my protest. Mr. Darcy expects all household members to attend. Clara will help you dress appropriately. She gestured to a young woman who'd appeared silently behind her, holding what looked suspiciously like a designer dress. Whoa no, I said, backing away. No, I'm not playing dress up for his royal grumpiness. The dress code is non-negotiable, Mrs. Henderson said firmly. Now, shall we do something about that hair? 2 hours later, I stood in front of a mirror, barely recognizing myself. They transformed me from disaster zookeeper to someone who might actually belong in a mansion, with my usually wild curls tamed into elegant waves, and my face showing signs of actual makeup application. The dress was midnight blue, simple, but expensive looking, and fit perfectly. Which again, super creepy. The egg sat on a velvet cushion nearby, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Every time Clara had tried to move it more than 10 feet away from me, it had started that annoying humming again. Dinner is served in the main dining room, Clara announced. Would you like me to show you the way? I glanced at the egg. What about? Whoa, you'll need to bring it with you. Mr. D'Arcy's orders. Great, because what could be more normal than bringing a glowing dragon egg to dinner? I picked up the egg, which felt warm against my skin, and followed Clara through the maze-like corridors. With each step, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something bigger and more dangerous than I realized. I was right, of course, but I had no idea just how right I was, because waiting in that dining room wasn't just Cassie and Darcy. No, that would have been too simple. Instead, I walked straight into a dinner party from hell, complete with a woman who looked like she'd stepped off a runway, and was currently shooting daggers at me with her eyes. Spoiler alert. The ex-fiancé, a man who smiled like a snake, and immediately made my skin crawl. The charming but evil brother. As I'd soon find out. 3 Anne. Sitting at the head of the table, like an emperor on his throne. Cassie and Darcy himself, who took one look at me and actually choked on his wine. The egg in my arms pulsed brighter, almost smugly, and that's when I realized, this wasn't just dinner, this was an ambush. Chapter 3. The dinner party from hell. Literally, here's a pro tip. If you ever find yourself at a fancy dinner party with people who definitely hate you, try not to be holding a priceless dragon egg. It really ruins your ability to make a quick escape. Ah, Miss Carter, the man with the snake smile said, rising from his seat. We've heard so much about you. Funny, I replied, clutching the egg tighter. I've heard nothing about any of you. Cassian had recovered from his wine incident and was now watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He'd changed since earlier, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than my student loans. It was unfair how good he looked, considering he was basically my kidnapper. Allow me to make introductions, he said, his voice clipped. My brother, Elias Darcy, my colleague Victor Alaric, and Delphine Blackwood. The runway model cut in, her smile sharp as a knife. Cassian's fiancé. The egg in my arms suddenly felt very hot. Ex-fiancé, Cassian corrected, and something electric crackled through the air between them. A temporary situation, Delphine said smoothly, given recent complications. She looked pointedly at the egg in my arms, and I had the sudden urge to throw it at her head, which was probably not the appropriate response to meeting your kidnapper's ex. But hey, I was having a rough day. Please sit. Elias gestured to the only empty chair, right between him and Victor Alaric, totally not suspicious at all. The egg needs its own seat, I said quickly. It's very particular about these things. It was a complete lie, but I'd rather die than sit between Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Instead, I made my way to the far end of the table, placing the egg on a chair next to me. To my surprise, Cassian didn't object. How fascinating, Victor Alaric spoke for the first time, his eyes fixed on the egg. I don't suppose you'd consider. She wouldn't, Cassian cut in sharply. You don't even know what I was going to say. You were going to offer her money for the egg. Cassian's voice could have frozen hell itself. And the answer is no. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everyone has a price, Darcy, even your new pet project. The egg started humming ominously. I'm not as anything, I snapped, and the egg isn't for sale. 10 million, Victor said casually, as if he were offering to buy me coffee. I choked on my water. What? 20 million, he amended, watching my reaction. She said no, Cassian growled. 30. The egg suddenly burst into such brilliant light that everyone at the table had to shield their eyes. When the glare faded, there was a distinct scorch mark on the tablecloth in front of Victor. Well, that was new. Perhaps, Elias said smoothly, we should discuss something else, like how my dear brother managed to lose control of the most powerful dragon egg in existence to a... What was it you do again, Miss Carter? I'm a zookeeper, I said proudly, just to watch him wince. How quaint. Delphine set down her wine glass with excessive force. This is ridiculous, Cassian. We both know there's a simple solution. Break whatever accidental bond occurred and let's proceed with the original plan. It doesn't work like that, Cassian said tiredly, like they'd had this conversation before. Of course it does. Dragons are creatures of ancient magic. Surely there's a way to. There isn't. His voice was final. The egg has chosen. Chosen what? I asked. But everyone ignored me. Then we'll find another egg. Delphine insisted. There are no other eggs. Cassian's fist hit the table, making the silverware rattle. This was the last one. The only one. And now, he cut himself off, jaw clenched. Now what? I demanded. Will someone please tell me what's going on? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as everyone turned to look at me. The egg's glow pulsed faster, like a warning. You really haven't told her? Elias asked, sounding delighted. Oh, this is precious. Told me what? Dragon eggs, Victor said, leaning forward. Only hatch in the presence of their destined keeper's true mate. I blinked. Okay, Anne. And Delphine practically snarled. That egg was supposed to hatch with me and Cassian. We spent years preparing for it. But now that it's bonded to you. Horror dawned slowly as I pieced it together. No, I said. No, no, no. You can't mean. Congratulations? Elias raised his glass with a smirk. You're magically bound to my brother for life. The egg chose that moment to roll off its chair and into my lap, as if seeking comfort, or maybe just enjoying the chaos it had caused. I looked at Cassian, hoping someone would yell joke, and end this nightmare, but he just stared back, his expression unreadable. I think I'm going to be sick, I announced. Not on the tablecloth, Delphine sneered. It's ancient elven silk. That's when the windows exploded. Glass shattered inward as dark figures crashed through, their faces hidden behind magical masks. Delphine screamed, Elias dove under the table, and Victor, the coward, actually ran for the door. I clutched the egg to my chest as Cassian vaulted over the table toward me, his hand outstretched. Give me the egg and run. Like hell, I shouted back. You said not to let anyone else touch it. I meant, he ducked as a spell whizzed past his head. Anyone except me. Obviously, that's not what you said. Are you seriously arguing about this right now? Another spell hit the wall behind us, leaving a smoking crater. The egg was vibrating in my arms, its glow turning from gold to angry red. Duck! Cassian tackled me just as something explosive sailed over our heads. We crashed to the floor together, his body covering mine, the egg trapped between us. And despite the chaos, despite the fact that we were literally being attacked by magical assassins, all I could think was, he smells really good for someone who's trying to get me killed. The egg apparently agreed, because it suddenly got very, very hot. Oh shit, I whispered. And then it started to crack. Chapter 4, oh great. Now I'm a dragon mom. There are certain moments in life when everything seems to move in slow motion. Like when you're watching your coffee cup fall off your desk, or when your ex is waving at you across the street, and you realize too late they were actually waving at someone behind you. Or, when a dragon egg is hatching in your arms during a magical assassination attempt. This is not happening. I muttered as another crack appeared across the egg surface. This is not happening. Move! Cassian yanked me behind an overturned table as another spell blasted past. The egg pulsed with heat between us, its shell now covered in a spider web of golden cracks. Can't you stop it? I asked desperately. Stop a dragon from being born? He looked at me like I was insane. Would you like me to try stopping the sun from rising while I'm at it? A massive explosion rocked the dining room. Through the chaos, I could see Delphine throwing spells at the attackers, her designer dress somehow still perfect. Elias was nowhere to be seen. And Victor, was that coward actually filming this on his phone? We need to get you out of here, Cassian said, his eyes scanning for an escape route. The egg is about to explode, I finished, because the shell was now glowing white hot. Cassian swore in what sounded like ancient Elvish. Hold on to me. What? He grabbed my waist, pulling me flush against him. Trust me, I absolutely do not trust you. But before I could protest further, the world twisted inside out, colors blurred, my stomach lurched, and suddenly we were in a completely different room. A library, from the looks of it, with walls of books stretching up to a domed ceiling. You could teleport this whole time, I demanded, trying not to throw up. Why didn't you do that earlier? Because, he said through gritted teeth, it takes a lot of power, and, he stumbled, catching himself against a bookshelf. That's when I noticed the blood seeping through his shirt. You're hurt. I'm fine. The egg, right on cue. The egg gave one final, violent shake. The shell split open with a sound like breaking glass, and a wave of golden light filled the room. And there in my arms, covered in glittering shell fragments, was a baby dragon. It was small, about the size of a cat, with scales that shifted between gold and rose gold in the light. Tiny wings unfurled like gossamer, and when it opened its eyes, they were the exact shade of amber as mine. The dragon blinked at me. I blinked back. And then it said, in a voice that somehow managed to be both squeaky and imperial, "Mama." "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not. Return to sender." The dragon tilted its head, confused. "Mama? This isn't happening. I'm not a mother. I can barely keep my succulents alive." "You can't argue with a dragon," Cassian said, sliding down to sit on the floor. He was definitely getting paler. "They imprint at birth. It's done." The baby dragon turned to look at him, its tiny snout wrinkling. Then it looked back at me and declared, "Papa?" Cassian actually choked. "What?" "No." But the dragon had already made up its mind. It spread its wings and glided awkwardly from my arms to Cassian's lap, where it curled up like it belonged there. "Mama," it said to me. Then to Cassian, "Papa." It looked extremely pleased with itself. "This isn't, we're not." I gestured frantically between us. "This is not a thing." The dragon ignored my existential crisis and started purring. Actually purring, like some kind of scaly cat. Worse, the sound seemed to be having an effect on Cassian, whose rigid posture was starting to relax despite his obvious attempt to maintain his grumpy billionaire aesthetic. "We need to move," he said, but made no attempt to get up. "They'll find us soon." "Who were those people? What did they want? What do you think they wanted?" He nodded at the dragon, which had started nibbling on his expensive tie. "The last dragon in existence. Do you have any idea how powerful it will become?" The baby dragon chose that moment to sneeze, producing a tiny puff of smoke that smelled like cinnamon. "Yeah," I said drily. "Terrifying. It's not funny. There are people who would kill for this kind of power." "My father," he cut himself off, jaw clenching. "Your father what?" Before he could answer, the library doors burst open. We both tensed, but it was only Delphine, looking somehow even more perfect than before despite having just been in a magical battle. She took one look at the baby dragon in Cassian's lap, and went absolutely still. "It hatched," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "With her." The dragon lifted its head and hissed at her. Actually hissed, like a tiny golden kettle about to blow. "Delphine," Cassian started, but she cut him off. "Do you know what this means?" Her perfectly manicured hands were trembling. "All our plans, everything we worked for, is no longer relevant," he finished firmly. "Like hell it isn't." She raised her hand, dark magic crackling around her fingers. "I can fix this. I can." The baby dragon suddenly stood up, spread its wings, and shot a jet of golden flame directly at Delphine's face. She screamed, and dove out of the way, her hair singed at the ends. The dragon looked extremely satisfied with itself. "Bad witch," it declared in its squeaky voice. "No hurt, Mama and Papa." And that's when I realized three things. One, this dragon was way smarter than it should be for something that just hatched to it was also way more powerful than a baby should be. 3, I was completely, utterly screwed because now I had a baby dragon calling me Mama, a wounded billionaire it insisted on calling Papa, and a homicidal ex-fiancé who looked ready to commit murder. Just another Tuesday, right? Chapter 5. This is fine. Let me set the scene. I was sitting on the floor of a magical library, covered in dragon eggshell fragments, while a baby dragon alternated between breathing fire at Cassian's ex-fiancé and trying to eat his tie. Cassian himself was bleeding all over what looked like a priceless Persian rug, and Delphine was having what appeared to be a complete psychological breakdown. Just another normal day in my new life, apparently. "We need to get you to a healer," I told Cassian, eyeing the growing bloodstain on his shirt. "I'm fine," he insisted, which would have been more convincing if he wasn't basically gray in the face. The baby dragon headbutted his chest and made a concerned chirping noise. "Papa hurt?" "Papa's an idiot," I muttered, then caught myself. "I mean, he's not Papa. And I'm not Mama. And you need a name that isn't Ember," the dragon declared proudly. "What? My name Ember?" It flapped its tiny wings, sending sparks floating through the air. "Mama gave name." "I absolutely did not." "Actually," Cassian interrupted, wincing as he shifted position, "you did. Yesterday, when you were filling out that report about finding the egg, you wrote possible ember scale patterns in the description." I stared at him. "You memorized my report?" "I memorize everything," he said, like that wasn't a creepy thing to admit. "Enough." Delphine's scream made us all jump. Dark magic was still crackling around her hands, and her perfect makeup had started to run, giving her a slightly deranged look. "This isn't happening. I won't let it happen." Ember hissed again, golden flames flickering around its tiny teeth. "Bad witch, go away." "Or what?" Delphine sneered. You'll singe my hair again? You're just a baby. You have no idea how to use your power. But I do. I've studied dragon magic for years. I know exactly what you're capable of. What you'll become. And I won't let some random zookeeper steal that from me. She raised her hands, dark magic swirling into what looked like a very nasty spell. But before she could release it, a new voice cut through the tension. That's quite enough, Miss Blackwood. We all turned to see Elias Darcy standing in the doorway, looking immaculate despite the chaos earlier. He was holding what appeared to be an ancient staff, its crystal tip glowing with power. Elias, Cassian's voice held a warning. Don't. Oh brother. Elias smiled that snake smile of his, always trying to protect everyone. But who's going to protect them from you? He raised the staff, and suddenly I couldn't move. Neither could Cassian or Delphine. Only Ember seemed unaffected, looking between us with increasingly angry chirps. You see, Elias continued conversationally, this was supposed to be simple. The egg was meant to hatch with you and Delphine, creating a perfect trinity of power that our father could control. But you had to go and develop a conscience, didn't you? Started asking questions about father's plans, about what he really wanted to do with the dragon's power. Your father? I managed to ask through whatever spell was holding us. What does he want? To restore the natural order, a new voice answered. An older man stepped into the room, his resemblance to Cassian and Elias unmistakable. He carried himself like a king, power radiating off him in waves that made my skin crawl. Lord Raphael, Delphine breathed, sounding both terrified and awed. Dragons, Lord Raphael said, his voice soft, but carrying easily through the room, are abominations. Ancient beings that should have died out long ago. Their power is too great, too chaotic. It upsets the balance of our world. So why keep this egg? I demanded. Why not destroy it? He smiled. And it was nothing like either of his son's smiles. This was the smile of someone who had never known warmth. Because, my dear, to destroy something completely, one must first understand its power. Control it. And what better way to control a dragon than to have it imprint on those already under my control? Cassian made a sound like he was trying to break free of the spell. You arranged everything. The engagement, the egg, all of it. Of course I did. Though I must admit, Miss Carter here was unexpected. Lord Raphael studied me like I was an interesting bug. No matter. We'll simply have to adjust the plan. You can't have Ember, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. My dear girl, he chuckled. I already do. You see, the dragon may have imprinted on you. But you work for me. Your apartment building? Owned by me. Your entire life has been orchestrated to bring you to this moment. You just didn't know it. Ice ran down my spine as pieces started falling into place. The job opening at the reserve when no one was hiring. The suspicious ease with which I'd gotten my apartment. The way the egg had just happened to be where I would find it. No, I whispered. Yes, Lord Raphael smiled. Welcome to the family, Miss Carter. We have such plans for you and your little dragon. But he'd forgotten something. Something very important. Ember had been watching this whole exchange, its golden eyes growing darker with each word. And while everyone was focused on the dramatic villainous monologue, none of them noticed the baby dragon starting to glow. No hurt, family, Ember growled, its squeaky voice suddenly not so squeaky anymore. Lord Raphael turned, finally noticing the change in the air. What? Ember spread its wings, which were definitely larger than they had been a minute ago, and roared. The sound shook the entire library. Books flew off shelves, windows shattered, and the binding spell holding us shattered like glass. Impossible, Lord Raphael breathed. It's just a baby. It can't. Golden flames erupted around us, forming a protective circle. Ember was growing before our eyes, its tiny body elongating, scales shifting, and multiplying. Run, Cassian grabbed my hand, pulling me toward a hidden door behind one of the bookcases. But Ember will be fine, he assured me. Better than fine, by the looks of it. He was right. The last thing I saw before he pulled me through the door was Ember, now the size of a horse, facing down Lord Raphael with flames dancing in its jaws. Bad grandfather, it declared in a voice that shook the walls. Time out. And then everything exploded in golden light. Chapter 6. Running from rich people is not how I plan my week. Here's what they don't tell you about escaping from evil magical billionaires. It's really hard to do when one of your companions is bleeding out and the other is a rapidly growing dragon having a temper tantrum. Left. Cassian pulled me down another hidden corridor as explosions rocked the mansion behind us. There's a safe room in the east wing. You have a safe room? I had to practically jog to keep up with his long strides, despite his injury. Why didn't we go there when we were first attacked? Because, he grunted, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. My father helped design it. Oh, that's just great. Any other family secrets you want to share? Secret twin? Underground lair? Vampire cousins? Now isn't the time for, he stumbled, catching himself against the wall. Okay, that's it. I stopped, forcing him to stop too. You're barely standing. We need to deal with that wound before you pass out and I have to drag your stupidly tall body through these ridiculous corridors. We don't have time, make time. I pushed him into what looked like a small sitting room, closing the door behind us. Shirt off. Now. He raised an eyebrow despite his pallor. Hardly the time for, finish that sentence, and I will let you bleed out. To my surprise, he actually laughed. It transformed his whole face, making him look younger, more human. Then he winced, the movement obviously causing pain. Fine, he conceded, carefully removing his jacket and shirt. I tried very hard to focus on the wound, and not on everything else, which was difficult, because apparently being an evil billionaire's son required intense workout sessions. See something you like? He asked drily. I see an idiot with a magical wound that's probably killing him. I shot back, examining the injury. It was worse than I'd thought. Dark magic seemed to be spreading from the wound like poison through his veins. This is bad. It's fine. Stop saying that. Nothing about this is fine. My voice cracked slightly. Your father is trying to kill us. Your brother is evil. Your ex-fiancé is insane. And our baby dragon is currently destroying your mansion. Our baby dragon. Not the point. Another explosion rocked the building. Closer this time. Through the window, I could see golden flames lighting up the night sky. Time to move, Cassian said, reaching for his shirt. Wait, I pressed my hands against his wound. Not sure what I was doing, but knowing I had to try something. I can't fix this completely, but maybe. I closed my eyes, remembering all the healing magic I'd learned while working with injured magical creatures. It wasn't much, I was no healer, but I knew the basics. Warmth flowed from my hands into his skin. When I opened my eyes, the dark magic had receded slightly, and some color had returned to his face. How did you do that? He asked quietly. Magical creature first aid. Required course for all zookeepers. I tried for a smile. Though usually, I'm dealing with unicorn scrapes, not whatever dark magic your father used. Miss Carter, pretty sure we are past that. I mean, we do have a dragon baby together now. His lips twitched. Justine. Yes. Thank you. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. Before I could respond, the door burst open. How touching, Victor Alaric drawled, pointing what looked like a very expensive magical weapon at us. Really, I'm moved. But I'm afraid this little romance has to end. Victor, Cassian's voice went cold. Whatever my father's paying you. Oh, this isn't about money anymore. Victor's smile was almost manic. This is about power. Do you have any idea what that dragon is capable of? What it could do in the right hands? It's a baby that just grew to the size of a horse, and is currently breathing golden fire. Victor gestured to the window, where we could still see flames lighting up the sky. Imagine what it could do with proper training, proper control. It's not a weapon, I snapped. It's a living being. It's the last dragon in existence, Victor countered, and it's worth more than you could imagine. Now you're going to come with me. And we're going to. He never finished that sentence, because at that moment, the ceiling exploded. Ember's massive head crashed through the roof, golden eyes blazing. In the chaos of falling debris, I noticed two things. One, the dragon was now definitely bigger than a horse. Two, it looked really, really angry. Bad man, Ember growled, its voice vibrating the entire room. No hurt, Mama and Papa. Victor raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Ember simply sneezed. The sneeze released a wave of golden magic that turned Victor's extremely expensive weapon into a bouquet of flowers. He stared at the flowers in horror. That's not, how did it? Run, Cassian suggested mildly. Victor ran. Ember looked extremely pleased with itself. I help. Yes, sweetie, I said, because apparently I was fully embracing this dragon mom thing now. You helped, but maybe with less property damage next time. The dragon tilted its head, considering this. Then it carefully reached down through the hole in the ceiling, nudging us both onto its neck. We fly now, it announced. Grandfather coming. He very mad. Mad is an understatement, Cassian muttered, securing his arm around my waist as Ember lifted us out of the ruined room. He just lost control of the most powerful magical being in existence. About that, I said as we rose into the night sky, the burning mansion shrinking below us. Want to tell me exactly why your father orchestrated this whole thing? And why he apparently arranged my entire life to make it happen? Cassian was quiet for a moment, his breath warm against my ear as we held onto Ember's scales. It's a long story, he finally said. Well, I gestured to the open sky around us. Looks like we've got time. Ember rumbled in agreement, soaring higher into the clouds. Below us, I could hear Lord Raphael's enraged roar as he realized we were escaping. You know this means war, Cassian said quietly. I know. I leaned back slightly, trying not to think about how natural it felt. But we've got a dragon. And each other, Ember added helpfully. Not helping, sweetie. But as we flew through the night sky, a dragon-riding fugitive family being chased by magical billionaires, I had to admit, this wasn't exactly how I'd planned my week to go, but it wasn't entirely terrible either. I mean, sure, I was probably going to die, but at least I'd die with style. Chapter 7. Everything I know about my life is a lie. Cool. There are certain conversations that should probably happen on solid ground, not while riding a baby dragon through storm clouds at midnight. Finding out your entire life has been an elaborate setup by an evil magical billionaire is definitely one of them. Start from the beginning, I said, trying to ignore how high up we were. Why did your father arrange all of this? Cassian's arm tightened around my waist as Ember banked sharply to avoid a particularly angry-looking cloud. What do you know about the Dragon Keepers? Just what everyone knows. They were an ancient order that worked with dragons before they went extinct. Some kind of special bloodline that could communicate with them. They didn't just communicate, he said. They were bonded. Soul to soul. The dragons chose them. Like Ember chose you. Below us, ancient forests rolled past in the moonlight. Ember seemed to know where it was going. Which was good. Because I certainly didn't. The Dragon Keepers were powerful, Cassian continued. Too powerful, according to some. Including my ancestors. Let me guess, they decided to do something about it? They orchestrated what became known as the Great Purge. Hunted down every Dragon Keeper. Every dragon. Claimed it was for the greater good, to prevent any one group from having too much power. Lightning flashed in the distance. Ember growled at it, and the storm clouds actually moved away. Did our baby dragon just intimidate the weather? Focus, Justine. Right. Sorry. Evil ancestors killing dragon people. Continue. My father was obsessed with the old stories. He believed that if he could control the last dragon, he could restore our family's rightful place in the magical hierarchy. His voice was bitter. He spent years searching for dragon eggs, and when he finally found one, he needed someone to hatch it with. I finished. Enter your ex-fiancé? Delphine was chosen for her magical ability. The plan was for us to bond with the dragon together, creating a power triangle that my father could control. But you started asking questions. I found his research. The real reason he wanted the dragon. Cassian's voice dropped. He doesn't just want to control magical society. He wants to remake it. Purge anyone he deems unworthy of magic. That's... I searched for words. Actually no. I don't have words for how messed up that is. Ember snorted in agreement, sending sparks floating into the night sky. But what about me? I asked. Where do I fit in? Cassian was quiet for a long moment. When I started questioning things, my father realized he needed a backup plan. Someone who could bond with the dragon if his original plan failed. Someone with the right bloodline. Ice ran down my spine. What are you saying? Your parents' accident when you were young? It wasn't an accident. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Only Cassian's arm kept me from sliding off Ember's back. No, I whispered. They died in a car crash. It was normal, mundane. Nothing magical about it. Your parents were in hiding, Cassian said gently. They were the last of the Dragon Keepers. That's not... I would have known. Would you? Think about it. The strange things that happened around you as a child. The way magical creatures always responded to you. How you can heal with a touch. Memories flooded back. Animals that should have been dangerous acting tame around me. The way I always seemed to know what the magical creatures at the reserve were feeling. The strange dreams of flying. My father found you after your parents died, Cassian continued. Arranged everything, your education, your job, your apartment. Kept you close but unaware, waiting for the right moment. So I could be his backup plan, I said numbly. Yes, but something went wrong. What? You touched the egg too soon. Before he was ready. Anne. Cassian hesitated. Anne? And I saw you. Ember chose that moment to do a little loop-de-loop, nearly giving me a heart attack. What does that mean? I demanded once we were flying straight again. It means, Cassian sighed, that when I saw you with the egg, saw how it responded to you. I couldn't go through with my father's plan. I couldn't let him use you like he tried to use me. So you tried to get me away from the egg. Yes, By kidnapping me and locking me in your mansion? I never said it was a good plan. Despite everything, I actually laughed. You're really bad at this whole protecting people thing. You know that. I'm learning, he admitted. Ember rumbled underneath us. Papa trying. Papa good heart. Whose side are you on? I asked the dragon. Family side, Ember declared proudly. Then added. But mama right. Papa need work on people skills. I'm being criticized by an infant dragon, Cassian muttered. Wonderful. But I barely heard them. My mind was spinning with revelations. My parents, the dragon keepers. My entire life being orchestrated by a man who wanted to use me to help commit magical genocide. We need help, I said suddenly. Obviously. No, I mean. I turned to face him, which was tricky while dragon riding, but felt important. Your father has been planning this for decades. He has resources, allies, power. We can't fight him alone. We're not alone, he pointed out. We have a dragon. A baby dragon. Big baby dragon. Ember corrected proudly. Still a baby. We need real help. Other magical families, creatures, anyone who would oppose your father's plans. Cassian was quiet for a moment. Then, I might know someone. But you're not going to like it. Why? Because, he grimaced, it's my mother? Ember perked up. Grandmother? Your mother? I stared at him. The one who supposedly died 10 years ago? Apparently, Cassian said drily. Faking your death runs in the family. Before I could process that bombshell, Ember suddenly dove, plummeting through the clouds toward what looked like a massive lake in the middle of nowhere. What are you doing? I yelped. Feel funny, Ember announced. Need land. Funny how? Cassian demanded. The dragon's scales were starting to glow again, brighter than before. Growing time. Oh no. Brace for impact, I yelled, just as Ember hit a growth spurt mid-flight and tripled in size. We crashed into the lake with all the grace of a magical disaster, sending up a wave that probably showed up on weather radar. When we surfaced, spitting out lake water, Ember was the size of a small house, and looking very pleased with itself. Ta-da! It announced. Big dragon now. I pushed wet hair out of my face, and glared at Cassian. Still think we don't need help? He spat out a mouthful of lake water. Fine, we'll go see my mother. But first, he looked at our now massive dragon, which was doing happy loops in the lake and creating small tsunamis. We need to teach someone about appropriate growth spurts. Good luck with that, Papa. I smirked. He splashed water at me. I splashed back. Ember, delighted by this new game, created a wave that nearly drowned us both. And that's how I found myself having a water fight in a random lake at midnight with a billionaire and a house-sized baby dragon, while being hunted by magical assassins. You know what? Maybe I wasn't handling the whole my life as a lie revelation very well, but at least I was handling it with style. Chapter 8. Meeting the not-so-dead mother-in-law. Fun fact. When you're soaking wet, freezing cold, and riding a house-sized dragon through the night sky, the last thing you want to hear is that your destination is in the actual Arctic Circle. You've got to be kidding me, I said, teeth chattering despite being pressed against Cassian's equally wet but annoyingly warm chest. Your mother lives in the Arctic. Antarctic, actually, he corrected, because apparently the Darcy family had never heard of doing anything halfway. There's an ancient magical settlement hidden under the ice. Perfect place to hide if you're trying to avoid my father. Couldn't she have hidden somewhere tropical? Ember snorted, sending out puffs of warm air that temporarily melted the clouds around us. Cold fun. Make ice cream. I had several questions about how a dragon knew what ice cream was, but before I could ask, Cassian tensed behind me. We're being followed. I looked back. Through gaps in the clouds, I could see several dark shapes gaining on us. They looked like, were those flying cars? Seriously? I demanded. Your father has flying cars? Prototype magical vehicles, Cassian said grimly. Still experimental, very unstable, very expensive. How expensive? About 10 million each. Cool, cool, cool. I watched as one of the vehicles shot past us, nearly clipping Ember's wing. So your father is literally throwing money at us to try to kill us. Welcome to the family, Ember growled, its scales heating up. No like flying metal things. Ember fix. Wait, Cassian started. But it was too late. Our dragon child took a deep breath and exhaled what can only be described as a tornado of golden flame. The nearest flying car swerved to avoid it, crashed into another car, and they both went spinning into the clouds. Good baby, I couldn't help cheering. Please don't encourage property damage, Cassian sighed, but I could hear the smile in his voice. Your father started it. More vehicles emerged from the clouds, these ones armed with what looked like magical harpoon guns. Because apparently this night needed to get worse. Ember, Cassian called out. Time to show them why dragons ruled the skies. Our dragon child let out a delighted roar and suddenly shot straight up, climbing so fast my stomach dropped. The flying cars followed, but they couldn't match Ember's speed and agility. We broke through the cloud layer into clear, starlit sky. The aurora borealis danced above us in sheets of green and purple, and for a moment, I forgot we were being chased by magical assassins in flying cars. Then Ember did something incredible. Its scales began to shimmer, not with the usual golden glow but with something else. Something that looked like, is our dragon reflecting light? I gasped. Better, Cassian said, sounding almost proud. It's bending it. Before my eyes, Ember's massive form seemed to ripple, and then, vanish. We were still sitting on its back, but to anyone looking up, we would be invisible. The flying cars burst through the clouds below us, weapons ready, but they were firing at empty air while we hovered silently above them. Did you know it could do that? I whispered. No one knows what dragons can do, Cassian whispered back. That's what terrifies my father. They're pure magic, uncontrollable, unpredictable. Predictable. Ember's voice rumbled quietly. I predict bad men go splash. Splash? What do you mean SPL? The dragon suddenly reappeared and shot a blast of fire at the clouds below us. Not at the cars, but at the clouds themselves. The sun heat meeting the Arctic cold created an instant storm system. Within seconds, the flying cars were caught in a localized blizzard. We watched as they spun out of control, their magical engines freezing up. One by one, they had to retreat, or risk falling out of the sky. That's my clever baby, I said proudly. Ember smart. Our dragon agreed. Now we go see grandmother? Yes, Cassian said, his voice tight. If she's still there. We flew on through the night, the aurora lighting our way. The temperature dropped steadily, until I was pretty sure my hair was turning into icicles. Only Ember's natural heat kept us from freezing solid. Finally, after what felt like hours, we approached what looked like a solid wall of ice. But as we got closer, I saw it. A shimmer in the air, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Except these waves were flowing down, creating a curtain of magical energy. The veil, Cassian explained. It hides the settlement from the outside world. Only those with permission can pass through. Do we have permission? We're about to find out. Ember flew straight at the magical barrier. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting to slam into solid ice. Instead, I felt a warm tingling sensation, like stepping through a sunbeam. When I opened my eyes, I gasped. Below us sprawled a hidden city, its crystal spires rising from the ice like frozen flames. Gardens flourished in magical domes, creating pockets of eternal spring in the endless winter. And everywhere, magical lights danced through the air, turning the whole scene into something from a fairy tale. Welcome to Glacialis, Cassian said softly. The city under ice. It's beautiful, I breathed. It's also heavily guarded, he added as several figures on winged creatures rose to meet us. Let me do the talking. The guards, riding what looked like frost phoenixes, surrounded us with weapons drawn. Their armor seemed to be made of living ice, and their faces were hidden behind masks of frosted crystal. This is a restricted zone, one of them called out. Identify yourselves. Cassian sat up straighter. I am Cassian Darcy, son of. We know who you are. The guard cut him off. And we know who hunts you. They turned to look at me. But who is she? Before Cassian could answer, a new voice rang out across the sky. She's the last dragon keeper. A figure rose from the city on wings of pure magic. A tall woman with Cassian's dark hair streaked with silver. And my son has finally brought her home. Cassian's breath caught. Mother, Lady Darcy, very much alive and apparently able to fly, smiled. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that suggested she knew 1,000 secrets, and wasn't planning to share any of them. Welcome to Glacialis, Justine Carter, she said. We've been waiting for you for a very long time. Ember, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly perked up. Grandmother fly. Ember fly better. And before anyone could stop it, our house-sized dragon child decided to show off its aerial skills by doing a series of loop-de-loops through the crystal spires of the hidden city, while carrying us. Your dragon, Lady Darcy observed as we whirled past her, needs flying lessons. Yeah, I managed between loops. We're working on that. And that's how I met my not-dead future mother-in-law, upside down, still dripping lake water, while our dragon child showed off like a magical toddler on a sugar rush. Somehow, I didn't think this was going to be a normal family reunion. Chapter 9, in which I learn why rich people should not have magic. Look, I've seen some weird stuff since getting dragged into this whole magical dragon keeper mess, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the sight of Cassian Darcy's mother hosting what she called a simple afternoon tea in her private crystal garden. First of all, the garden itself was inside a massive dome made entirely of enchanted ice that somehow didn't melt, even though it was perfectly warm inside. Second, actual honest-to-God butterflies made of light were fluttering around, occasionally landing on the white roses that grew up through the crystalline floor. And third, Lady Aurora Darcy herself was casually levitating a complete tea service, while reclining on what appeared to be a throne carved from a single massive diamond. "Darling," she said to Cassian, completely ignoring both me and the baby dragon currently trying to eat one of the light butterflies, "you really should have told me sooner about your mate. I had to hear it from that dreadful Delphine woman at the Magical Heritage Society." I choked on my tea. "I am not as mother," Cassian cut in smoothly. "We're here about father." Lady Aurora's perfectly manicured hand tightened on her teacup. "Yes, I suppose we are." She finally looked at me, her silver eyes unnervingly similar to Cassian's. "Though I must say, if you're trying to stop my husband from destroying the last dragon, bringing said dragon right to his doorstep seems unwise." Ember, giving up on catching the butterflies, crawled into my lap and sneezed a small fireball that nearly set the tablecloth ablaze. "Trust me," I muttered, "this wasn't my idea." "No," Lady Aurora agreed. "I imagine it wasn't." She set down her cup with a delicate clink, "just as it wasn't my idea for Raphael to become obsessed with destroying magical creatures. But here we are." The temperature in the dome dropped several degrees. I pulled Ember closer, grateful for his natural warmth. "Mother," Cassian said quietly, "what aren't you telling us?" Lady Aurora's perfect composure cracked, just slightly. "Your father, he wasn't always like this, but 25 years ago, something happened. Something involving the last adult dragon and," she paused, looking directly at me, "and the final massacre of the dragon keepers." My stomach lurched. 25 years ago? Right around when my parents— "Whoa, good," I said, my voice only slightly strangled. "More family drama." Because that's exactly what the story needed. Cassian's hand found mine under the table. I was too shocked to even pretend to be annoyed about it. "The thing is," Lady Aurora continued, "your father didn't just want to kill the dragons. He wanted to absorb their power. And he very nearly succeeded with the last adult dragon. But something went wrong with the spell. And instead of gaining the dragon's magic," she gestured to the ice dome around us. "Well, let's just say there's a reason I prefer to stay in climate-controlled environments these days." Ember made a concerned chirping sound, and head-butted my chin. I scratched under his scales absently, my mind racing. So Lord Raphael isn't just trying to kill Ember. He's trying to finish what he started 25 years ago. "Yes," Lady Aurora said softly, "and this time, he has something he didn't have before." She looked at Cassian, a son who's proven quite adept at combining magic with modern technology. I turned to stare at Cassian, who had gone very, very still. "The containment facility," he said. "The one I designed for studying magical artifacts. That's what he's going to use to trap the dragon's power." "He's going to use your invention to kill my dragon?" I demanded. "Seriously?" "Technically," Cassian said through gritted teeth, "our dragon. Not the time, Darcy." "Children," Lady Aurora interrupted, somehow making the word sound both elegant and terrifying. "Perhaps we could focus on the fact that my husband is planning to destroy the last dragon in existence and potentially tear apart the fabric of reality in the process." Ember chose that moment to sneeze again, this time setting fire to one of the light butterflies. It exploded in a shower of sparkles, making him sneeze again, which started a chain reaction of butterfly explosions across the garden. I watched the chaos unfold, and thought about parents, and betrayal, and the weight of destiny, or whatever this whole thing was supposed to be. Then I thought about the way Ember still curled up against my chest every night, trusting me completely to keep him safe. "Right," I said, standing up and cradling my dragon close. "Time to go stop your husband from destroying the world with my boyfriend's evil tech." "I am not your boyfriend," Cassian protested automatically. I smiled sweetly at him. "No, you're my magically destined mate, remember? Much worse." Lady Aurora actually laughed. "Whoa, I do like her." She waved her hand, and a section of the ice dome melted away. "There's a secret entrance to Raphael's private labs through the old wine cellar. The password is Draco Dormeans." Her smile turned sharp. "Do try not to destroy too much of the family estate, dear." I looked at the woman who had apparently been living in an ice palace for 25 years, because her husband's evil scheme backfired. then at Cassian, who was pinching the bridge of his nose like he could feel a headache coming on, then at Ember, who had somehow managed to set fire to his own tail. No promises, I said. Chapter 10, Breaking, Entering, and Other Bad Life Choices. The Darcy family wine cellar was exactly as pretentious as you'd expect. Floor-to-ceiling racks of bottles that probably cost more than my yearly salary, Gothic archways carved with scenes of magical creatures, ironic, given the circumstances, and honest-to-God floating candelabras providing atmospheric lighting. This is ridiculous, I whispered as we crept between the racks. Who needs this much wine? Focus, Cassian muttered back. He had changed into all black for our breaking and entering adventure, which was just unfairly attractive. The entrance should be behind the 1842 Bordeaux collection. Ember, who we had tried and failed to leave behind with Lady Aurora, squirmed in my arms. No fire, I told him sternly. We are in a room full of very expensive, very flammable alcohol. He gave me his best innocent dragon eyes. I wasn't fooled. Here, Cassian said, stopping at a particularly dusty rack. Draco Dormines. The rack swung silently outward, revealing a dark passage beyond. Because of course it did. Your family, I informed Cassian, is completely insane, says the woman carrying a baby dragon. Hey, I didn't choose this life. Your egg chose me. Could we perhaps have this argument later? He pulled out his phone, which doubled as some kind of magical scanner, because apparently that was a thing rich people had, and frowned at the display. The lab should be 3 levels down. Father's been pulling massive amounts of power from the ley lines beneath the estate. That doesn't sound ominous at all. I adjusted my grip on Ember, who was starting to get heavy. Quick question. Why exactly did you design a magical containment facility for your clearly evil father? Cassian's jaw tightened. He said it was for studying dangerous artifacts, for keeping people safe. And you believed him? He's my father. The words came out bitter. I wanted to. Well, great. Now I felt bad for him. I reached out and squeezed his arm. Just once. Hey, at least your daddy issues might help destroy the world. That's way more impressive than regular daddy issues. He actually laughed, though it was barely more than a breath. You are incredibly bad at comfort. Yeah, well, you're incredibly bad at. I broke off as Ember suddenly went rigid in my arms. What's wrong, buddy? A low humming filled the air, making my teeth vibrate. Ember whimpered and pressed closer to my chest. He's starting the containment sequence, Cassian said sharply. We need to move. Now. We ran down the passage, no longer bothering with stealth. The humming grew louder with every step, until it felt like my skull might shake apart. Ember was trembling, little wisps of smoke curling from his nostrils. We burst through a set of heavy doors into what looked like a cross between a medieval dungeon and a tech startup's wet dream. Floating screens displayed incomprehensible magical data, crackling arcs of energy connected various pieces of equipment, and in the center of it all. Hello, son, Lord Raphael said pleasantly. I've been expecting you. Because apparently we couldn't escape a single villain cliché. He stood on a raised platform, surrounded by a cage of shifting, crystalline energy that looked disturbingly similar to Lady Aurora's ice palace. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit pristine. He looked exactly like what Cassian might become in 30 years if Cassian were also completely evil. Father, Cassian said, his voice cold, step away from the containment field. Or what? Lord Raphael smiled. You'll stop me? With what? That little lizard? He gestured to Ember, who had started growling. Please, it's barely more than a hatchling. The perfect vessel, really. All that potential power, not yet set in its ways. Once I merge its magic with my own. Yeah, because that worked so well last time, I cut in. How's your wife enjoying her new ice palace lifestyle? His smile vanished. The last attempt failed because the dragon was too old, its power too fixed. But this time, the crystalline cage pulsed, sending another wave of that horrible humming through the room. This time, I have better technology, better containment, better everything. He looked at Cassian. Thanks to you, son. Cassian took a step forward. Father, please. This isn't, oh, spare me the dramatics. Lord Raphael raised his hands, and the crystal cage began to expand. I had such hopes for you, Cassian. The perfect heir, combining magic and technology in ways no one else could imagine. But then you let that common little zookeeper steal your dragon egg, and now, he sighed. Well, I suppose I'll just have to fix everything myself. The cage surged outward. I clutched Ember tighter, backing away. Cassian? Now would be a great time for a plan. Working on it. Work faster! The humming reached a fever pitch. Ember squirmed in my arms, then suddenly went still. He lifted his head, looked directly at Lord Raphael, and hiccuped. A tiny ball of golden flame shot from his mouth, straight through the crystal cage, and hit Lord Raphael's perfectly styled hair. For a moment, everyone just stared as the most powerful magical businessman in the world stood there with his very expensive hair on fire. Then all hell broke loose. Chapter 11, in which everything goes spectacularly wrong. And then right. Here's the thing about magical battles. They're significantly less elegant than the movies would have you believe. Especially when they start because a baby dragon set a megalomaniac's hair on fire. Lord Raphael's enraged roar shook the entire laboratory. The crystalline cage shattered, sending razor-sharp shards flying everywhere. Cassian grabbed me and pulled me behind a massive piece of equipment, just as a bolt of crackling energy blasted past us. Any chance he has a fire extinguisher in here? I asked, ducking as another blast hit our cover. Not the time, Justine. I'm just saying, for a guy so obsessed with containing magical power, he's not great at. I broke off as Ember suddenly launched himself from my arms. No wait, but the little dragon was already airborne, zooming around the laboratory, like a golden bullet. Lord Raphael shot blast after blast at him, but Ember was too quick, too small a target. Each missed shot hit another piece of equipment, sending sparks and magical energy flying everywhere. The containment field is destabilizing, Cassian said, his eyes on one of the still functioning screens. If it collapses completely, let me guess. Boom. Essentially. Fantastic. I watched as Ember did a perfect loop-de-loop around Lord Raphael's head, breathing tiny fireballs that singed his expensive suit. Should we help him? The dragon appears to be doing fine on his own. I meant your father. Cassian's face hardened. He made his choice. Right. Family drama later. Preventing magical explosion now. I studied the chaos around us. The containment field's energy was visible now, rippling through the air like heat waves. The humming had changed pitch, becoming more of a shriek. And Lord Raphael was laughing. Yes, he shouted as another piece of equipment exploded. Yes, let it all collapse. He spread his arms wide, his silver hair wild around his face. When the field destabilizes, it will release enough power to level this entire wing. And in that moment, when all that magical energy is free, his eyes gleamed with a fervor that was definitely not sane. I will take it all. Whoa, that was not good. Cassian? I said, please tell me you built in some kind of off switch. The main controls are on that platform. He pointed to where Lord Raphael was standing. But they're coded to respond only to Darcy blood. I stared at him. You're kidding. It seemed secure at the time. Your family, I said for what felt like the 100th time, is completely insane. Another explosion rocked the laboratory. Ember swooped down to us, chirping urgently. The containment field shriek was reaching painful levels. Okay, I grabbed Cassian's hand. New plan. You're going to hate it. What? I yanked him up and started running toward the platform. Your dad wants Darcy blood? Let's give him some. Understanding dawned on his face. Justine, no. But I was already shoving him toward the controls. Ember, time for a distraction. My wonderful, chaos-causing dragon didn't hesitate. He shot straight for Lord Raphael's face, breathing a stream of golden fire that wasn't deadly, but was definitely annoying. Lord Raphael stumbled back, swatting at the air. Now, I yelled. Cassian slammed his hand onto the control panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. The containment field shriek cut off. The rippling energy in the air froze, then began to spiral inward, drawn toward the center of the platform. Lord Raphael's triumphant laugh turned to horror as he realized what was happening. No. He tried to move, but the energy was pulling him in like a whirlpool. No, I won't. Ember landed on my shoulder as we watched Lord Raphael Darcy, billionaire businessman and would-be magical tyrant, get sucked into his own containment field. There was a flash of blinding light, a sound like 1,000 windows shattering at once, and then, silence. When my vision cleared, Lord Raphael was encased in a perfect sphere of crystalline ice, his face frozen in a mask of rage. Well, I said after a moment, like mother, like father, I guess. Cassian made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. I took his hand again, gentler this time. Hey, you okay? He looked at our joined hands, then at me. You risked everything on the chance that I would choose to stop him. Yeah, well, I shrugged, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. You're kind of predictable, Darcy. Noble to a fault, even when your family's totally crazy. You're insane, he said, but he was smiling slightly. Both of you. He reached up to scratch under Ember's chin. The dragon purred, a sound like gentle thunder, says the guy who coded his evil tech to only work with family DNA. Perhaps we could discuss my poor life choices somewhere that isn't a partially destroyed magical laboratory. Sure, I grinned at him. Your mom's ice palace is pretty nice this time of year, he groaned, but he didn't let go of my hand as we made our way out of the lab, leaving his father's frozen form behind. Ember flew lazy circles around our heads, occasionally breathing small fireballs just because he could. You know, I said as we climbed the stairs back to the wine cellar, normal couples just go to dinner and movies. They don't have to deal with magical containment fields and evil family members. Are you saying we're a couple? I'm saying you're stuck with me, Darcy, dragon magic, and all that. Horrible, he said, but he was definitely smiling now. Simply horrible. Ember landed on his shoulder and sneezed, setting Cassion's perfectly styled hair on fire. Yeah, we were going to be just fine. Epilogue. Apparently happy endings include paperwork. You know, I said, staring at the mountain of documents on my desk, when I signed up to be a zookeeper, no one mentioned anything about managing an entire magical creature sanctuary. You didn't sign up for any of this, Cassian pointed out without looking up from his laptop. You accidentally touched an egg. Details. 3 months had passed since the whole dramatic showdown in Lord Raphael's secret lab. In that time when the Magical Heritage Society had officially recognized me as the last Dragon Keeper, which apparently came with a fancy title, and way too many responsibilities. Lady Aurora had taken over Darcy Magical Enterprises, running everything from her ice palace with terrifying efficiency. Lord Raphael made a lovely decorative ice sculpture in the main lobby. 3 Elias was still on the run somewhere, probably plotting revenge, but that was tomorrow's problem. 4 and I had somehow ended up as the new director of magical creatures, at what was now called the Darcy Carter Sanctuary for Endangered Magical Species. You missed a form, Cassian said, sliding another paper onto my stack. We need your signature to approve the new unicorn habitat. I glared at him. I hate you. No you don't. No, I admitted, I don't. But I still think it's unfair that you're making me do all this paperwork when I saved your family's company and stopped your father from destroying the world. You also set fire to an entire wing of my family estate. That was Ember. As if summoned by his name, a golden blur shot through my office window, scattering papers everywhere. Ember, now the size of a large dog, landed on my desk and dropped something in front of me. It was Victor Alaric's very expensive designer tie. Ember, I said slowly, why do you have Victor's tie? The dragon gave me his most innocent look, which hadn't worked since he was hatchling-sized. My phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Magical business mogul Victor Alaric spotted running through financial district in singed suit. Claims that demon lizard is after me. I looked at my dragon. Really? Ember chirped happily, and curled up in a patch of sunlight, clearly very pleased with himself. Your dragon, Cassian said, is a menace. Our dragon, I corrected, reaching over to straighten his slightly singed collar. And don't pretend you're not proud of him for terrorizing your business rival. His lips twitched. I admit nothing. I started to respond, but then he pulled me closer and kissed me, and I decided the paperwork could wait. Ember, watching us with his ancient, knowing eyes, breathed a small heart-shaped fireball that set off the sprinkler system. Some things never changed, but honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. 6 months later, Lady Aurora threw us an engagement party in her ice palace. Ember only set fire to 3 priceless magical artifacts, which was practically good behavior for him. Delphine showed up uninvited and tried to curse us, but it turned out dragon fire was excellent at deflecting dark magic. Who knew? The Magical Heritage Society insisted on a formal ceremony to recognize our union, complete with ancient rituals and complicated protocols. I made Cassian promise there would be no eggs of any kind at the wedding. Just think, he said as we watched Ember chase light butterflies through the ice garden. Someday, we'll tell our children this story. Yeah, I said, leaning against him. How I got stuck with their father, because I touched an egg at work. How you saved magic, he corrected. And me, I smiled. Sap. Only with you. He kissed my temple. And only because you're stuck with me. Horrible, I said. But I was smiling too. Above us, Ember looped through the air, breathing golden fire, that turned the ice palace's ceiling into a kaleidoscope of light. In the lobby of Darcy Magical Enterprises, Lord Raphael's frozen form stood as a reminder that some prices were too high, even for power. And somewhere in the world, other magical creatures waited to be discovered, protected, and loved. But those were adventures for another day. For now, I had my dragon, my billionaire, and a pile of paperwork waiting on my desk. 2 out of 3 wasn't bad. The end.